morning to Facebook. Jackie Broman here from TBA Law. Every Monday morning I try and do a short snippet of legal information and we let you know what the topic's going to be coming up. So if you do have questions, you can either attend live and ask the questions, or you can direct message us questions beforehand if you can't get to it live. All the live videos then get posted onto our page so that you can go back and look at any videos that are relevant for you, or tag any videos that are relevant for other people. So today we're talking about the conveyancing process. So I've done a lot of videos on wills and estate planning and deceased estates, which is my specialty, but TBA Law does a lot of property work as well. Conveyancing is part of property law work. Conveyancing is the actual transaction of transferring a property from one person to another. And most of the time that happens under a contract of sale between third parties with an agent, finding a purchaser. So the last couple of videos I have done some information on how to prepare to sell your property and how to prepare to buy a property. And today I wanted to go through the conveyancing process from a purchaser's perspective and from a vendor's perspective, so you understand what we're doing behind the scenes. So the first step, as you would have gathered from the last couple of videos, is preparing your vendor statement if you're selling it, which is providing all the due diligence information that you need to provide for a purchaser. And from a purchaser's perspective, the first step is to review all that due diligence, and if you're going to put in an offer, make sure that the offer is reflected properly in the contract and that there's relevant special conditions in the contract before you sign it. All right, so we prepare, we have prepared for download for people the 9-step conveyancing process, which we use so that you can follow through along the process if you needed to. So there's the 9 steps for buying and the 9 steps for selling. So let's do it from the perspective of selling first. So someone's putting a property on the market, they go to the real estate agent, find an agent that they're happy with, and before it really should be marketed, the due diligence needs to be put forward in the form of a vendor statement under Section 32 of the Sale of Land Act. So at that point, after you've appointed an agent, you would then come to a solicitor and we would start putting that document together for you. It takes about 1 to 2 weeks. So that's the very first step. So preparation of the vendor statement. Now we also prepare a draft contract, which we would prefer agents to use, and we send that through to the agent at the same time as the vendor statement, because there are certain special conditions that we want in contracts for our vendors. That's not a necessary step though. Some solicitors and conveyancers don't provide a contract to the real estate agents, and then the real estate agent will use a standard contract form from the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. So property's on the market, a purchaser comes along and makes an offer. There's often some negotiations about any terms that are in the contract, and then the contract is provided to each party to sign. At that point, we can review it again if you want us to, or you can sign it feeling pretty confident that you understand the terms. So some of the terms that a vendor should be aware of is particularly if a purchaser wants the contract subject to finance. So that's a date that we have to make sure passes. We really tell vendors that you're not certain of a sale until you're in an unconditional contract. So a contract is conditional when there's still conditions that need to be met. Third step is we have a contract that's signed by both parties, and then, like I say, finally, all those conditions have been met. So we're in a contract that we absolutely know is proceeding. So those sorts of clauses, as I said, might be subject to finance. It might also be subject to the purchaser doing a pest and building inspection. So those are the main clauses relevant to residential properties. So once we know that a property is actually going to sell and the contract will proceed, we then contact your bank and make sure that they get their discharge of mortgage ready. Now, quite often it's the banks that are hardest to deal with in the conveyancing process. Sometimes we get the discharge to them and they don't action it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then all of a sudden they pick the file up and go, oh, we haven't done this, a week till settlement, we won't be ready. So this is something that in some ways has been fixed by the introduction of electronic conveyancing, because not only do we send them a physical signed discharge authority, but we also prepare a settlement workspace and invite them to that. So once they receive that settlement invite, it triggers somewhere in their internal office, or at least we hope, that, oh, hopefully we've got a discharge authority somewhere around so that we can be ready for this settlement. Then step 5 is that we start getting the PEXA workspace ready. As I said, the online platform for electronic settlements. And part of that process is all the declarations we've got to make to the State Revenue Office. Now, 5 years ago, you used to have to sign like 3 or 4 forms for the State Revenue Office when things were done on paper. Now there's one electronic form that we complete and either have you sign electronically or we send you the printed version of it to have you sign and return it, and then we sign it electronically for you. So that electronic form gets submitted, and in the back end somehow it's linked to PEXA. So PEXA picks that up, and if all the details are the same and it works from a purchaser's end as well, it calculates the stamp duty automatically, and that appears in the workspace, so it gets paid on settlement. In the PEXA workspace, after we've opened that workspace up for the settlement, the purchaser is also invited so that they then prepare the transfer of land. We then double check that the transfer of land's correct and that all the details are needed in there. The purchaser then also triggers adjustments. So they work out what the outgoings are and adjust it to the day of settlement so that you pay up until settlement and they pay for the rest of the financial year for those outgoings. So they submit all of that into the PEXA workspace. We double check all that, and then we also make sure that we double check our figures in our own calculations as well and send you that. Around this time as well, the bank hopefully is ready to discharge, and they send us an amount that they need to discharge, and that's something else that we'll double check with you to make sure that they're not overcharging or it's not what you didn't expect, particularly if it's only a partial discharge and you've got multiple properties on the one mortgage. So those are the 8 steps leading up to settlement, and then bang, 9th step should be settlement. Hoping that all parties are all in the PEXA workspace, that they've all signed all their forms that need to be signed and put all the figures in, and it all balances, and then it should settle. On settlement, payments are automatically made from the workspace, as I said before, to the State Revenue Office for stamp duty, as well as any rates payments, they're made automatically from there. And also the payments made to you directly into your bank account from there too. So you'll get it the same day instead of 3 days later on a bank check like it used to be. So in some ways that makes things far more efficient as well. There's less follow-up for us after a settlement too, because we're not sending out notices of acquisition to everyone because that's automatically done through PEXA. So there has been some efficiencies created, but more and more duplication and double entry into various systems. So as you can imagine, there's at least 3 systems now that we're entering all the details into to affect a settlement. So that's the 9 steps from a vendor's perspective if selling the property. Now the 9 steps from a purchaser's perspective to buying a property. And obviously they follow very similarly through because we're operating on the opposite side of a vendor transaction. So the first step is always to, as I said before, double check the due diligence on the property before you enter into a contract. You make an offer, the contract is prepared, any special conditions that you want to put into the contract. So this is step 2. When you're happy with the contract, you sign it and you exchange a contract. So you're in a signed contract. Now, quite often you will make the contract conditional to a number of things. And so the 3rd step is getting the contract unconditional. So we need to meet all those conditions that you've put into the contract. So we monitor those dates and make sure that that happens as well. So those are the first 3 steps. Once we know that we're in a contract that is going to proceed, we need to make sure that your finance is ready. So there should be, by this stage, unconditional approval on your finance. Your bank should now be issuing you mortgage documents. Sometimes we also need to countersign those, but the mortgage documents need to be signed so that they'll be ready for settlement. Step 5, we prepare all the back end for settlement. So there's the 2 platforms again that we need to prepare. The first one is the PEXA platform. So the vendor has hopefully created a workspace that we get invited to. We need to log into that workspace and create all the transfer documents, the notices of acquisition and everything that go along with that. So that's step 5. Step 6 is making sure all the State Revenue Office documents are correct and submitted into the State Revenue Office so that we get a stamp duty amount. We then have to make sure that State Revenue Office is talking to PEXA and link those 2 things together so that your stamp duty is paid automatically. Step 7 is to put in all the statements of adjustment figures. So we go into PEXA again and we make sure that you're not paying for any more outgoings than you should be paying for. And we're making sure that all the figures are entered in that you need to pay for at settlement. We put in a figure that is required for settlement. We make sure your bank is invited into the PEXA workspace so that they can see the amount they need to be providing and that they're linked in there as well. So step 8 is then to book settlement in. So through that workspace as well, we select a date and we make sure that everyone agrees to that date and that everyone has signed everything and is ready for settlement. Quite often that's a lot of ringing around to make sure that all 4 parties are ready to go. But once they are all ready to go, all documents are signed, everyone's accepted that date, all the financials are in and it all balances, settlement then should go through automatically, which is step 9. So you will automatically have notifications sent to council and water authorities that you're now the new owner, and funds will automatically be taken from your mortgage account and any other account that you've given authority to make the payment. And then it's all done. From there, we notify the agent as well, and the agent should release the keys for you so you can go and get your new property. So 9 steps for each buying and selling. That's the conveyancing process. That's what's involved in transferring a property. And the same thing goes if we're doing an internal transfer between family members or a transfer from a deceased estate to a beneficiary. All those same steps pretty much apply. It's just whether stamp duty is payable or not. But we still have to contact the State Revenue Office even to get an exemption from stamp duty. So I hope that that's helpful. Again, this video will be posted onto Facebook so that you can go back and look at it if you need to. Those downloads are available on our website, the 9 steps to buying a property or the 9 steps to selling a property. Otherwise, next week I'll be back here again, Facebook Live, Monday at 10 o'clock. Look out for what